welcome to UNHACKED. I'm Brian Graff, Senior Vice President of Business Development here at Abacode. We're here every Thursday at 4 p.m. to take you through a cyber topic of the week. We cover the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why of the most recent security events and hacks, and give you insight into how the attack happened so you can protect yourself from it happening to you. So today we want to talk about the Emotet Botnet attacks that have been occurring over this past week. Emotet is a ransomware gang that was very prolific in 2019 in the US and the UK, responsible for a large number of ransomware attacks. And they went quiet earlier in the year and now have begun ramping up attacks in Japan, Italy, and New Zealand. So Emotet is a ransomware gang. They use the Emotet malware package, and they operate the same way most ransomware gangs do. They set up botnets that will send out hundreds of thousands of phishing and spam emails, just hoping to get infect one laptop in an organization or even a personal laptop. The botnets they create are they're gigantic, and there's 3 of them that operate in the world right now. So really quick, a botnet is just a network of computers that's been hacked and infected with malware, and they're taken over usually without the user's knowledge. And they, by infecting that laptop or that personal computer, they usually get into an email account, find all the emails that person has email accounts, and sends out more malware. So they propagate like a virus. They infect those computers, and now the ransomware gang has a large network of computers to send spam and phishing emails all throughout the world. So Emotet has stepped up their attacks in Japan and in New Zealand, and they operate very similar to other ransomware. This is one of the more sophisticated ransomware packages that gets sent out. So what it does is an unsuspecting user clicks on a link from an email. It goes into, especially if it's a work computer, will go into that email account and scan for old conversations. So if you've had email conversations with a vendor or customer going back and forth several times and sending out attachments, that's a good vector for the user to for the hacker to send out to a customer. So they can take over that account, send an email to that customer saying, hey, can you open up this attachment? That's usually all the email will say. And if you've been going back and forth with someone 10 or 11 times and you've sent attachments already, then they may not think twice and just open the attachment, and then that customer or that vendor is also infected. So once the malware is on your laptop or on your workstation, it propagates just like any other ransomware. So if your production network is not segmented from your corporate network, it will propagate into the production network. And once it has a good enough footprint, it will shut down and encrypt your network data, and you will not be able to operate or do any business until you pay the ransom fee or you're able to stand up a backup system from your failover and your backup solutions. So we talk a lot about ransomware. It is the most common way that you're going to get infected. It's the most common attack. Breaches are still very common, but hackers have moved on from selling data to just stopping a business from making any money. And instead of taking your data, be it PHI, be it PII, even intellectual property, if I steal your data, I still have to go on the black market and sell it. And as time goes on, PII and PHI becomes less valuable because there's so much of it out there. So that's an extra step to actually gain any revenue. The easier way is just to shut down your business and hold your own network hostage until you pay a ransom. So Emotet actually does both. It will steal whatever it will exfiltrate data that it finds, so that the ransomware gang can then hold your system hostage. And once you pay that ransom, they can also hold your data hostage and force you to pay a ransom in order to not publish it to their sites. We discuss other ransomware gangs doing this. This is a more common practice to add to the fear and the the shame in having your company and your customers' data hacked and stolen. So this is going to be the most common type of attack that all companies are going to have to face. Every company in America and the world right now is getting ransomware and phishing emails right now, every single one. So how do you protect yourself against it? I'm going to say the same things over and over again, because those security mechanisms that we talk about are going to be your best bet in terms of stopping ransomware from infiltrating or propagating in your network. So step one is always going to be security awareness. Your employees have to know that security is their responsibility, and that they're going to get these emails more and more. These hackers are getting better and better at it. It's not just going to be some random email that they can easily detect and delete. It might be from their customer. It might be from their vendor. It might be someone posing to be the vendor, or a hacker might have already gotten into a vendor or customer account, and it could be from a legitimate email. So just because it comes from your boss, or just because an email comes from a customer that you've been talking to for 3 months trying to land a deal, or a vendor that you talk to every month, that doesn't mean that email is legitimate. They could have been hacked yesterday. They could have been hacked 6 months ago. And now that's the hacker talking to you, not the vendor. So making sure that you hover over links before you click on them. If you're unsure about something, call the person. Don't email them back, but call them back and say, hey, did you mean to send this to me? If anything looks fishy, it probably is. So always take that extra minute or so to look through, make sure you're reading the email correctly, and not just blindly clicking on anything. You also want to make sure that along with security awareness training, you're doing phishing campaign simulations. It's not enough to just tell your employees once a year, bring them into a conference room and show them a couple slides saying, hey, don't click on phishing links. That's going to go in and out of their brains, and they'll be thinking about something else an hour later. There has to be testing that occurs, that you're aware of how well your employees are performing. Just like you perform a network vulnerability assessment or a web application penetration test, you have to do a penetration test on your personnel layer as well. And the most effective way to do that is to pretend to be a hacker and send out phishing emails and see how many of your employees fall for them. So that if you're using a DocuSign or whatever your invoicing solution is, make it look like that, and send out an email that just looks a little bit off, but is using the right template, or is using the right DocuSign image link. There are phishing simulation solutions that we offer that can tailor your phishing campaigns to literally anything. It could look like PayPal accounts. It could look like invoice statements. Anything. Just because that might seem cruel or unfair, but that's what hackers are going to do now. They're going to go into your system. They're going to go into your vendor system. And if I'm in a vendor, I know that 10 customers are expecting an invoice from a certain invoice solution every month, that's the easiest way for me to get them to click on a link and wire money to an account that they'll never get back. So you have to actually test your employees so that they, hesitate for a second before they click. If they get hit once, they will hesitate, and they won't just blindly click on links anymore. And just telling them one time a year isn't going to do that for you. There also has to be you have to follow the trend and make sure it's going down. If you're doing phishing campaign simulations and you're at a 40% click-through rate, and 3 months later you had a 40% click-through rate, something's not jiving. The message isn't getting through to your employees. So that trend has to go down, and you have to get it to around 2% is what the industry states is a good click-through rate for your phishing campaign simulations. So if you're at that rate, you can be reasonably sure that most of the time a phishing email that gets in to your email solution isn't going to be clicked on. Beyond that, you also need email gateway security. So most, if you're using Office 365, or most email solutions have a basic, they will scrape the lowest of the low, the easiest phishing emails and spam emails off and not let those through. But a lot of these organizations, like I said, these hacking organizations will get into the vendor systems, they'll get into the customer systems, and your basic email solution isn't going to recognize that as phishing or spam because it's coming from a legitimate email. So in that case, just turning on basic phishing protection isn't enough. You really need to seriously consider advanced threat protection from a secure email gateway that will block more of those targeted spear phishing attacks. Again, it's not going to stop all of them, because email has to go through. It has to, you can't block every email. No business will ever get done. So those three things will help protect your email solution and your personnel layer. Beyond that, making sure you have endpoint protection up and running. So at the very least, you should be running a later version of Windows 10 if you're any sort of company or organization. And you should have that. Windows 10 comes with Defender, so you can turn that on, and that's at least a baseline of assurance that you have some kind of endpoint protection, so that if you do click on something, or an employee does click on a bad link, there's a good chance it'll get stopped. Beyond that, a next generation endpoint protection that is centrally managed and you can't turn it off at the laptop, and it's being monitored and it sends out alerts. That will help you not only quarantine these messages and quarantine the laptop if it does get infected, but also monitor the system if keep your employees from actually turning off the endpoint protection or the scans from running. If I can turn off my endpoint protection, it's really not that effective. That means if I can turn it off, that means the hacker can turn it off as well. Beyond endpoint protection, you also want to make sure that you are monitoring your corporate and production network using a SIM that aggregates all the logs from your endpoint protection, from your laptop syslogs, from your server syslogs, your firewalls, and correlating events. I mean, that emails and hacking, and malware. It doesn't send alerts to everyone saying, "Hey, I'm a bad piece of software." It's very hard to determine from a single device log that something bad is happening. You need to correlate the events from several different sources, and that has to happen in real time, 24 hours a day, from perhaps hundreds of thousands of sources. There's really no way to do that manually. There has to be some kind of log aggregator that puts all these logs in one place and aggregates the trends and says, okay, because of these three things, this is unusual activity, and I need to alert the security operations personnel or IT personnel and make sure they can investigate and determine if something bad is happening, quarantine that system, or enact an incident response procedure. You want to make sure that you are performing vulnerability scans and penetration tests. So you should be scanning your system at least quarterly and patching the systems according to a defined schedule. So at least every quarter you're running a scan. If you've got critical vulnerabilities, you need to patch those as soon as possible. And you need to have a defined patching schedule that gets your team in the habit of doing this. This is something that's not, I'm going to scan it one time and fix everything and that's it. It has to be ongoing. 0-day vulnerabilities, critical vulnerabilities, they come out all the time, and you have to be ready for them. And you have to have that process in place, because if you're not doing it at least every quarter, and then let's say you do a scan and you've got 30 critical vulnerabilities, if you fix 15 of them, that may bring your system down, because now your system doesn't run on the latest version of whatever it is that you just updated. So you have to keep up with that so that you're not stuck with a large batch of vulnerabilities to update at one time. You want to make sure, and also what vulnerability assessments and penetration tests will tell you is if your network is properly segmented. If I can get from a laptop to your corporate network to your production environment without too much hassle, that means malware can too. So segmenting your networks, corporate and production, your testing and your dev networks, and making sure that either if you're in a cloud environment, that your network security groups are up to date and they're properly filtering out any traffic other than specific to that environment. You want to make sure that that's in place, and you're monitoring that as well. So any changes to your network security groups, any changes to your endpoint protection software, any changes to the logging, to your backups, you need to make sure that if something is happening in one of those solutions, and let's say you get an alert saying your backup logs have been turned off, that's a very, very, very bad sign. There's only one reason why someone would do that, or two reasons. There's a legitimate issue that either they're installing a new service, which you should know about, so it shouldn't be a a surprise to you, or someone's trying to cover something up. So if there's any sort of security log changes, operations log changes, logs are being stopped, or you're getting, there's your storage is full and you can't write logs anymore. Those are all things you need to keep up to date all the time. You need to be monitoring it on a 24-hour basis. So a SIEM is really the only way to do that. So installing a log aggregator, making sure those logs are stored somewhere safe so the hacker can't get in and delete them. That is what is going to help you respond to a malware event and a ransomware event and recover. Beyond that, you need to plan for the possibility that your network will go down. So walk through that process. If your network goes down for 24 hours, 48 hours, can your company survive? Are there other processes you can use manually to keep your service up and running until you can stand back up your production or your customer environment? If not, then you need to be backing up your systems, which you should be doing anyway. But the level of rigor to where you back up your systems, to where you have hot failover sites or cold failover sites, you need to first sit down and think, how long can I stay out of business before my company goes under? And you have to be prepared to stand your system up, assuming you can't access your primary system, because that's what ransomware does. It locks everything down. You can't get to your server images. You can't get to your data. So if you don't have backups that are completely segmented from your production environment, you're not going to be able to do that. So your two options are going to be either pay the ransom, which are going from $70,000 to now they're close to $500,000, and we're seeing several $1 million ransoms being thrown out. Or you just go out of business. You either do it manually or you never get that system back. So you have to determine how far you have to go, and that's that's the entire point of a risk assessment and just planning process is, what are the potential problems that will happen and what's the best solution to protect against it? Maybe you only need to back up data offsite and then you can restore the database on an AWS cloud, and you don't need a hot failover site. But if you have a critical service, if you're in the healthcare industry, if you're in the financial service industry, and your system goes down for a day, for 2 days, depending on what that does to your customers, you need to be able to prepare for it. So that's all we have for today. Again, I'm Brian Graff, SVP of Business Development for Abacode. And if you like this information, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next Thursday.